I used to not believe in coming back. Not really. When people talked about healing from depression or managing anxiety, I would nod politely, maybe even smile. But deep down, I believed they were lucky exceptions, outliers in a game where most of us were doomed to lose. For me, everything started to blur during my early 20s. Panic attacks crept into my life like uninvited shadows, and then stayed. I remember one night when my heart started racing so fast I thought I was dying. My chest tightened, vision tunneled, hands trembled. I was sure I was having a heart attack. I called an ambulance, but when the doctors ran their tests, they found nothing. "You're healthy," they said. "Just stress." Just stress. Those 2 words felt like a slap. They made me question myself even more. From then on, I lived in fear. Fear of my body, fear of my thoughts, fear of the fear itself. It became a cycle. A strange sensation would spark a catastrophic thought, which would flood me with anxiety, which would then feed back into more symptoms. I didn't understand what was happening. I only knew I wanted it to stop. I stopped going out. I quit things I loved. I isolated myself, pretending to rest, pretending to heal, while inside I was drowning in a sea of intrusive thoughts and physical symptoms I couldn't control. And then, almost by accident, I stumbled onto something. A method. Not a miracle, but a method. Something called CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. Back then, I had no idea it would change my life. I had no idea it would give me back my mind. But that's where this story begins. Before I even knew what anxiety truly was, I had already built a prison inside my head. The bars weren't real. They were made of thoughts. Thoughts I trusted because they sounded like me. It would start with a sensation, a flutter in my chest, a sudden warm rush through my arms, a skipped heartbeat. These tiny, meaningless signals that most people brush off. I gave them meaning. Dangerous meaning. When my heart beat fast, I didn't think, "I'm excited." I thought, "I'm dying." That thought alone was enough to hijack my body. My breathing changed. My hands tingled. I felt a tightness around my throat. And with every new symptom, my brain screamed louder, "This is it. Something's seriously wrong." I Googled symptoms late into the night. Convinced myself I had heart disease, a brain tumor, some undetected terminal illness. Every time a doctor told me I was healthy, I'd feel relief for a few hours. Then the fear would come back wearing a new mask. I became hypersensitive to everything. A cramp, a dry mouth, a flicker of dizziness. Each became a trigger. But more than the symptoms, it was the thoughts that terrified me. The stories my brain spun were so vivid. And I believed every one of them. Anxiety had rewired me. It made me doubt myself, my body, my reality. I remember standing in a grocery store line, and out of nowhere, boom, that familiar rush. My heart racing, my face flushed, my legs weak. I'm going to pass out. I'll collapse right here. People will see, they'll think I'm crazy. My hands shook as I put the items back and walked out, trying to breathe, trying to calm down. But the damage was done. That store became a place of fear. Just like restaurants, malls, classrooms, even my own bedroom, an invisible map of avoidance grew inside me. And the worst part, I thought it was my fault. I thought I was weak, broken. I didn't understand that I was caught in a loop, one that fed itself every single time I obeyed the fear. I tried to fight it by ignoring it, by distracting myself. But nothing worked. The more I ran from it, the stronger it got. It was during this time when I felt most powerless that someone mentioned CBT in passing. They said, "It's about how your thoughts affect your feelings and behaviors." At that point, I didn't care what it was called. I just needed something, anything, to help me stop the cycle. But before I could break free, I had to understand what the cycle really was, and how my own thoughts had turned into my enemy. The first time I heard the phrase cognitive behavioral therapy, it sounded too clinical, too cold. Therapy that worked with logic and thoughts? It didn't sound like something that could soothe a storm as wild as mine. But I was desperate. Began by watching short videos online, animated explainers, TED Talks, people sharing their stories. Then I found a book in a local bookstore titled The CBT Workbook for Anxiety. It was thin, approachable, and most importantly, it didn't make impossible promises. I took it home, opened it like someone might open a survival guide on a lifeboat. It began by explaining something so simple, and yet it broke me. Your thoughts are not facts. I reread that sentence a dozen times. It struck me because I had never questioned my thoughts. I assumed that if I thought something, especially something scary, it must be true, or at least important, but CBT framed thoughts as habits, patterns, not truths. It explained the cognitive triangle, how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are linked in a loop. Change one, and you shift the whole triangle. And while emotions often feel out of control, and behaviors take time to unlearn thoughts, that's where we can intervene the fastest. So I started doing exercises. At first, I didn't believe in them. Writing down thoughts and labeling them felt like elementary school, but I did it anyway. Thought, my heart is racing, something's wrong. Emotion, panic. Behavior, checking my pulse. Googling symptoms, leaving the room. Then I added a second layer. What evidence supports this thought? What evidence goes against it? Evidence for, yes, my heart is racing, but that's it. No chest pain, no fainting, just a fast heartbeat. Evidence against, I've had this many times and I didn't die. Doctors have checked me. I'm not having other symptoms. It felt robotic at first, like going through motions. But it did one crucial thing. It created space. Instead of reacting in panic, I paused. And in that pause, I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't felt in years: control. I started challenging more thoughts. I learned to recognize catastrophizing, the habit of always assuming the worst. I practiced grounding myself in reality. What's the worst that can happen? I'd ask. And what if I survive it? Not every day was a win. Some days anxiety still steamrolled me, but now I had a flashlight in the fog. I wasn't walking blind. CBT didn't erase my anxiety, but it gave me tools to face it. It turned panic into data. It turned irrational fear into questions I could answer. I began to realize something that felt almost revolutionary. I wasn't broken. I was simply following faulty mental scripts, and those scripts could be rewritten. Learning about CBT was one thing. Applying it again and again every single day was something else entirely. Rewriting thought patterns isn't like flipping a switch. It's more like learning to write with your non-dominant hand. Awkward, unnatural, and exhausting at first. The first few times I challenged my thoughts, I still panicked. It was frustrating. I thought I was doing something wrong. But slowly, I started to see a shift. Not in the anxiety itself, but in my reaction to it. When my heart would race, I'd tell myself, this is a false alarm. It's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. I repeated that phrase like a mantra. Sometimes I'd write it on sticky notes. Sometimes I'd whisper it to myself under my breath in public. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to rewire the script. CBT taught me to spot the lies I told myself. You're not safe. You can't handle this. Something terrible is going to happen. I started replacing those with more truthful, balanced statements. You felt this before and came through it. Your body is reacting, but your mind can guide it. Even if something happens, you're capable of facing it. But it wasn't just about thinking new thoughts, it was about believing them. And that took repetition. One exercise that changed everything for me was the concept of exposure. Instead of avoiding places or sensations that triggered my anxiety, I began to face them intentionally. Little by little, I walked back into the grocery store I had once fled from. My hands were sweaty, my legs shaky, but I stayed. I focused on my breath. I noticed the fear rising, but I didn't run. I stood still and let it pass through me. That moment was tiny in the grand scheme of life. But for me, it was seismic. It was the first time I proved to myself that I could do it. The next week, I sat in a crowded restaurant. The week after, I drove alone on the highway. Each time, the voice in my head whispered, "You won't make it." And each time I answered, "Watch me." I also began journaling daily. I tracked not just my anxiety, but my wins, however small. Stayed in the movie theater even though I felt a panic attack starting. Challenged a scary thought and felt slightly calmer. These entries became evidence. Proof. My brain needed reminders, and this journal became my library of courage. And then something beautiful started happening. The fear lost its grip. Not all at once and not forever. But its voice became less convincing, its presence less overwhelming. I stopped asking, "When will this end?" and started asking, "What can I learn from this?" That shift from fearing anxiety to being curious about it changed everything. I even began to recognize early signs of spiraling. Instead of waiting until I was overwhelmed, I'd catch the pattern in its first few steps. Oh, I'm scanning my body again. That means I'm anxious. Time to ground myself. Ground. CBT gave me language for my inner world. It gave me clarity where before there had only been chaos. And most importantly, it gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Trust in myself. For the first time in years, I started planning for the future again. I applied for a job. I reconnected with old friends. I said yes to invitations instead of finding excuses. And I realized I didn't need to be anxiety-free to live a meaningful life. I just needed to stop letting fear be the author of my story. They don't tell you that healing doesn't look like a straight line. It's not dramatic or obvious. It's not a movie moment where everything clicks. Most days, it feels like nothing has changed. Until one day, you realize everything has. The biggest surprise in my journey wasn't the fear going away. It was how life slowly started to fill in the spaces where fear used to live. I began saying yes to small things. Coffee with a friend, a short bus ride, browsing books at a store. These weren't acts of bravery to anyone else, but to me they were victories, each one reclaiming a part of my life I had surrendered to anxiety. I started waking up without dread. That was a big one. For years, mornings had been the worst, where the wave of what-if thoughts came crashing in the moment I opened my eyes. But now those mornings grew quieter, not silent, but manageable. Work became easier too. I could sit through meetings without obsessing over my heartbeat or breath. I wasn't constantly waiting for something bad to happen. I was just there, present, living in the moment. My relationships improved. Because I wasn't so wrapped up in my own fear, I had space to actually listen to others. I became a better friend, a better sibling, a better human. People noticed. "You seem lighter," someone said. And I smiled, because that's exactly how I felt. But rebuilding wasn't just about adding back what I had lost. It was about creating something new. I built new routines grounded in care. Morning walks without my phone, reading before bed, deep breathing while cooking. Tiny rituals that anchored me, made me feel safe, made me feel like my life had rhythm again. I revisited old dreams, the ones I had abandoned when I thought I was too broken to pursue them. I enrolled in an online course, started volunteering. I even took a solo trip, a short one, but monumental to me. Each step added color to my life, like brushing paint over a canvas that had long been gray, and through it all, I kept practicing CBT. It wasn't something I used and forgot. It became a part of how I lived, a mental hygiene. When anxious thoughts surfaced, I met them with curiosity instead of panic. Is this thought helpful? Is it based on fact? What would I say to a friend thinking this? That constant dialogue became a muscle. It made my mind a safer place. There were setbacks. Of course there were. Anxiety still whispered. Bad days still happened. But they didn't undo me. Because now, I had tools. I had understanding. I had proof that I could come back. One of the most healing realizations was this. I didn't have to go back to who I was before the anxiety. That version of me didn't know what I know now. That version of me hadn't fought and won these quiet battles. I didn't want to go back. I wanted to move forward. This was my new normal. A life where fear didn't call the shots. Where I could feel anxious and still go to work. Still meet friends. Still travel. Still laugh. Still love. CBT didn't erase my pain. It gave me power. Power to meet life as it comes. To rebuild on my terms. To live with fear but not be ruled by it. As I write this, I think of the version of me who first discovered CBT. Scared, skeptical, exhausted. I want to tell him, keep going. The fog will lift, not all at once, but step by step you will find your way. And to anyone watching, listening, reading, who thinks they're too far gone, too broken, too afraid, I promise you, you're not. Healing isn't about becoming fearless. It's about becoming brave, enough to move anyway. That's how you build a new normal. Not overnight, but with every decision to keep going. In the next episode, I'll share the exact mental tools I used daily, what I called my CBT survival kit, and how you can build one for yourself. Stay tuned. Looking back, the word recovery doesn't quite capture what happened to me. Recovery implies going back to something, but what I experienced was more like becoming. Becoming someone who could sit with fear without letting it steer the wheel. Becoming someone who didn't need to be perfect to feel worthy. Becoming someone who could trust again. My body, my mind, and life itself. Cognitive behavioral therapy wasn't a magic cure. It didn't make the anxiety disappear forever. What it did was teach me how to live alongside it without fear dominating every decision. It gave me tools, and more than that, it gave me perspective. I learned that every thought is not a command. Every feeling is not a fact, and every moment of discomfort is not an emergency. That shift changed everything, not all at once, not in a blaze of glory, but over time, like water carving through stone, consistent, quiet, real. Now, when anxiety knocks, I don't brace for war. I listen, I breathe. I respond with clarity instead of chaos. It still visits, it always might. But I am no longer its hostage, and that to me is what healing really looks like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of resilience. If you're still in the thick of it, I want you to know. There is nothing weak about you. In fact, the fact that you're still here, still trying, still hoping, that's strength. That's survival. And that's the soil where growth happens. You don't have to see the whole path. Just take the next step. You don't have to fix everything today. Just begin. This story wasn't easy to share, but I share it in the hope that someone, maybe you, sees a piece of themselves in it. And maybe, just maybe, it becomes the spark that lights your way forward, because you can come back, you can rebuild, and you don't have to do it alone. In the next episode, I'll open up my personal CBT survival kit, the actual thought exercises, journaling prompts, and daily anchors I still use to this day. You'll see not just how I healed, but how I stay healing. See you there. Stay with me.